And what better way to spend a Wednesday than to discuss the betting of a cabinet reshuffle? It's Johnny Ward and William Kedjanyi. And we also have the impending Canadian election with Justin Trudeau's snap election gamble, even though it didn't really look a gamble at the time, proving to be a short price favourite that looks in big, big trouble. And that's next Monday, but this is Wednesday. And William Kedjanyi, you look better than ever in your beautiful shirt as the sun shines this September day, and you want to talk about a cabinet reshuffle.
Well, thank you very much for that compliment, Johnny, and thanks everybody for joining. And yes, what a lovely day for a cabinet reshuffle. Indeed, the sunlight is beaming through, and as you will have seen on the Star Sports Twitter feed, it's been a day for outside broadcasting. The whiteboard is up on the gazebo
yes,
in the back, which I feel is sort of quite apt as we play this game musical chair. So no, lots been happening today.
Yeah, it is one of my ambitions to go to the dogs and stand for like one of the bookmakers one night and just start roaring, take 5-4, take evens, all this and so on and so forth. But we have a 6-4 favourite in the race to replace Gavin Williamson.
Yeah, we do. And that betting has been absolutely topsy-turvy.
Have people been getting involved?
Yeah, they have. And we laid Oliver Dowden at 7-4 and 11-8. He became evens, but then it was put into the ether that he was set to be CCHQ chair, Tory party chair, where he will attend cabinet, but he won't be a cabinet member.
Hence why he's now 3-1.
Exactly. So that's put Kemi Badenoch, who started the day 7-2, and then was 11-4 for a brief while, as the strong favourite. Now, Badenoch had been tipped to replace Williamson when the reshuffle was meant to have taken place a couple of weeks earlier. We discussed it on previous episodes. Now it appears that doors have been opened for her in what is currently a much changed betting heat. By the time you watch this, it's possible the next education secretary will have been named, but Badenoch is getting most of the support now. We laid her at 9-4, very competitive betting heat. I'd say we'd be pretty happy having laid Dowden twice, particularly when it already looked as if he was going to stay as culture secretary.
Any kind of broader point to be made here by the General Williamson sacking in the first place?
No, not really, because it's amazing that he reached this long in the job. He's out of government now, which I think will be music to the ears of many. These cabinet jobs and the performances there will need to be strong. There are a lot of people jumping into really, really difficult positions. And education is a typical one of that. Keeping schools open over the next year is going to be a huge part, I think, of the government trying to retain its approval. And also then, of course, navigating various different things, such as culture inside schools, educational issues, and of course, a lot of crisis with universities, which always pop up. So there'll be a lot on the plate of whomever replaces Gavin Williamson. I think Williamson's stint there told us more about the party and politics than it did about education, to be honest with you.
And Dominic Raab now becomes Justice Secretary.
Yeah, so this is interesting because there have been titles attached to Raab's position.
And Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah, Deputy Prime Minister, Justice Secretary. The briefing is that his legal background will make him useful for that, but it depends on how big you think the Foreign Office is. It depends on how big you think it is as a position, and whether you think going to be the Deputy Prime Minister is a promotion or a demotion. I think it's very much sort of halfway house. They don't want him to see it as a demotion. They don't want people to see it as a demotion. I think they might just about get away with that. I didn't have him as the next Justice Secretary, and when we talk about him being Deputy Prime Minister, we have to remember he did literally stand in whilst the Prime Minister was in intensive care. So I imagine that back credit would have gone a long way, although his reputation has taken a massive hit, of course, with events in Kabul.
So any sort of repercussions in terms of the next Conservative leader, anything like that? Rishi Sunak still 2s, Michael Gove 6s?
No big moves, which I think is interesting in and of itself because it offers potential value. and I think that's
Liz Truss is tens now. Well, you presume is shortened a little bit.
Actually, no, she
Gone
was
the other way.
No, she stayed the same. She
Okay.
was 12. She was 12, I think, a month or two ago, but she hasn't been cut very much, considering she now holds a great office of state. The one thing for Liz Truss, however, is that she could get the Sunak issue Mark II, right? Which is that, you know, when the going gets tough, generally speaking, your reputation will take a bit of a hit the more people see you. And that's always possible with being the foreign secretary. There are a lot of things that are out of your control. You know, just ask Dominic Raab, who appears to have landed on his feet, but not without huge reputational damage. But that said, there's a lot going in her favour, and the party faithful do like her an awful lot. And she's well liked inside the party, and she's avoided for now most of the big scandals. You know, when people think about government ministers having screwed up, it's always going to be Williamson and Raab or Johnson himself. And Truss has avoided that so far. She'll need to do so at the Foreign Office, and that's difficult. It's even more difficult than being at the Department for Trade, international trade, where she's had a lot of rollover deals where, in a sense, she's been scoring some open goals.
And in terms of looking from the outside in here, from an Irish perspective, is this Boris responding to the two by-election defeats, or is there more to it than that?
There's more to it than that, but there's definitely a need for some freshness. And the by-election defeats will have played a part, as will the Raab debacle. I don't think Williamson was particularly well liked, and the cabinet haven't been performing particularly impressively. And generally speaking, most people's ratings of them are negative, I think, apart from, I want to say, Sunak and Johnson, I think, is teetering, depending on where you go for your polling. He has been teetering on the verge of negative net approval. I think he does have negative net approval at the time of speaking, actually. So a need for freshness was good and healthy. From the Conservative government's point of view, of course, Johnson will want that new clean slate. There are an awful lot of challenges facing the government. I don't imagine he'd want to take Williamson, etc., through another term of trying to keep schools open whilst cases rise, etc., etc. So understandable. I think he's responding to quite a few things. The government's got a lot of challenges, and that's a danger in itself, because the government is midway through a major spending review. You have a budget coming. I don't think it's a million miles off. Sorry, no, not a budget coming, but you're partway through a major spending review. You've got kids back in school. You've got people back at uni. You're heading into a winter where you need to execute this booster program very well. Lots of tough decisions to be made. Universal credits, the 20 quid a week uplift. I mean, God, calling it an uplift feels cruel. It's about to cut. Which is going to do savage damage, and then you have supply chain issues and Christmas coming, and then you have the national insurance rise. There's a lot going on, and the new cabinet appointees will need to be best than the last lot were. Long story short, or frankly, the national insurance increase might be the least of government problems.
Just finally on that, so the Liz Truss news, which means that 2 of the 4 top jobs go to women. Any coincidence there?
No coincidence. It has always been well publicised that the Conservative Party, and especially the government, were very keen to get more women in places of authority. They were very keen to sort of respond to the idea that the government decision-making had been very much male-led, which I think was a valid criticism. So no surprise that Truss went up. She'd been long tipped for promotion. I think no surprise if, as I strongly suspect, Kemi Badenoch gets the position as Education Secretary, because it will give the cabinet more diversity and more of a balance. And even if it's a PR battle, it's quite an important one, I think, for the government to win. This is me trying to speak from their position. It's a very popular insulation against criticisms of not being diverse enough, that we have female cabinet members, we have black and ethnic minority cabinet members, etc. So no, definitely the plan was to get more women in, and I think the Truss appointment will be quite significant in itself.
So it's long odds on there'll be diversity in the next Canadian government, because no over majority is 9's on, and majority for any party is 5-1. But despite the Liberal parties, as I said at the outset, Justin Trudeau's gamble potentially not paying off, it's still 1-3 to get the most seats, William, and Conservatives 9-4, and then it'll probably be interesting to see how the other parties go in terms of the New Democratic Party, in terms of potentially forming some sort of part of the government potentially, but 1-3 still the Liberal Party. This election takes place Monday.
Yeah, it does. The Liberals have benefited from last week's leaders' debate, and they hold a very narrow poll lead over the Conservatives. They have a bigger seat advantage. Unfortunately, the bit of value seeking, the bit of thievery I suggested recently did not come off, or it looks like it hasn't come off, because the projections, these are coming from CBC News, by the way, are basically at the middle point for the Liberals to 151 seats. It's 122 for the Conservatives. If we change it to likely, anything from 125 to 174 for the Liberals, and for the Conservatives, anything from 105 to 139. So Liberals should get most seats, but this has not been fruitful for Justin Trudeau, to be honest with you. And yeah, I think that he'll come to regret this one. There are big 2017 election vibes with Theresa May here, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because the snap by-election where you look, like what's the downside of this versus the upside? It just seems time and time again that it's riskier than it looks at the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's again this, and also the German election, which is quickly coming on the heels of Canada, I think are good reminders that elections and campaigns can still very much change things, even if the picture looks pretty entrenched. So yeah, I think there will be maybe, I mean, who knows how this translates across borders or whatever, but maybe there might be a bit more caution in the future about snap elections, which I hope people don't have. I hope leaders don't have that nerve about going to the population, particularly I think after the pandemic, or not after the pandemic, but in this phase of the pandemic. But yeah, for now, looks as if Trudeau's going to regret that decision. Looks as if the New Democratic Party with Jagmeet Singh going to play a very big role in the formation of the next government. And precious little time for things to change, but they always can.
Yeah, and next week we'll talk about Germany as well, the SPD 2-9. We might have a little chat about Scotland as well. It was interesting to see Ireland mentioned as an example of independence working. We're just a great bunch of lads, William. We've thrived at everything, and our corporate tax rate has nothing to do with that. Not one bit. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for yours. Yeah, that was the polling station. William, just on tick, as an evolving situation with regard to cabinet reshuffle. There's no reshuffling with our William Kedjanyi, and we will talk to you next week on Star Sports TV.